Hello, hello, Jeff. Hello, Trying. Hello, Mother. Hello, Father. Let me change the lighting a little bit. Um, let's see. Yeah, I had an ironic situation just now. Ironic situations meaning uh, the uh, the outcome is the opposite of what was intended. And no, I had gone through all sorts of fuss to try to make sure that my camera didn't freeze and did all sorts of tests. And then it passed all the tests. And then just 3 minutes before this, it froze. So I had to change cameras in a hurry, and I did. And I'm here. And oh gosh, hello, hello, for crying out loud, hello, hello. Oh my. Let's see. Testing. Okay, is the audio still off? Is the audio still off? I guess it is. Um, oh, you can hear fine. Okay, interesting. I'm wondering why it sounds different. I should be going right through the usual. No, something's wrong. All right, well, that's how it goes with ironies and complications. I'm sorry, I'm guessing the sound quality isn't as good. For some reason, it's not coming through. Um, let me see if this makes a difference. No. See, the funny thing about YouTube Live, from what I understand, let me see if it makes it. No, this doesn't allow me to fix it. I'm just seeing if there's no way to switch audio once you're in. Anyway, I am really sorry about these complications. Lord knows I was trying to make things work better. Okay, so let's talk anyway. Sorry, my sound quality isn't so good. Next week I'll have it all figured out. Um, what we do here, good, good. What we do here is what I do all day, only with you involved. I come up with new ideas. I run them through a particular kind of filter that I've cultivated over the years because my focus has been on how to shop among interpretations, what I call shopistemology. So I'm inviting you to do the same. If you've had ideas this week, things you've been thinking about, we can play with them. We can run them through the filter of whatever I've developed because it's a monologue, unfortunately, with bad audio. But uh, we also have the Sunday meetings every other week where we just simply explore. And Jeff showed up for that, and Rob showed up for that. Um, uh, and that's on Zoom, so we actually have the exchange. But if you've got ideas and you want to run them by my kind of filter, because everybody's got their filters, everybody's got their biases. And I love lots of people, but I think that when I notice what's happened to my life, I think my highest priority, in part because my life is unencumbered, I don't have a lot of people who depend on me at this point. My kids are all grown up, is to cultivate that filter. I'm trying to come up with the best in, I'm trying to cultivate my intuition. I need to train my gut because I don't actually have much confidence in my willpower or my ability to simply decide to be a certain way and then just be it because I decided it, which is I think, a standard problem. Um, uh, yes. So Jeff brings up something very related. So this is the thing. I keep thinking about how probability messes us up. Uh, can you say more about how probability messes us up? It's very related to a thought that was on my mind this morning and last night. So let me tell you, let me hear. One of the things that I have to do in this filter that I'm cultivating, is I'm really fussy about words, because there's so much room. If think about it as like you're walking down a trail and suddenly the trail gets vague. You can't tell whether you go this way or that way, and it slows people down, but it also makes for easy pathways. I was on a walk the other day with Joan Blades, the co-founder of Move On, and we come to a place where we had a choice, and one was uphill and the other was downhill. People will tend to choose the downhill one, even if it makes for later uphill. So, Jeff, I want to know what you mean about how probability messes us up. I think what you're talking about there is probably that life is iffy, that life is probabilistic. You probably don't mean the opposite, though one could interpret it in there, which is that our sense of probability, our stochastic minds, our ability to, the statisticians, and what they do messes us up. I think you're actually talking about the iffiness of life. It's easy to slip from thinking something is highly probable to completely eliminate the possibility of it happening. I think is what you mean, if of it not happening. Um, yeah. So one version of this would be Kierkegaard said life must be lived for is lived backwards, but must be lived forward, or something like that. I turned it into life um, is lived in gray, but must be turned black and white. Um, uh, or often must be turned black and white, or that we're compelled to turn it black and white. So where this relates has to do with, for me, with the difference between the shorter path, the easier path down versus the path up. In general, my work is paying attention to the motivations behind our misassessments, um, how we are motivated. And once again, this for me is a lot about confidence. That is, if I'm worn out on a walk and we come to a path where it goes down versus up, I want to go down. That would be the path I would choose, and I could come up with a rationality for it. And I could even come up with an extreme rationality for it by saying, oh, the upper way leads to hell and down leads to heaven. I know that get the altitudes reversed, but so I'm paying attention to the motivation, and I am still struggling to understand my relationship with hope. Um, so all of this is, for me, related. While our math compares, our interpretation of the data changes. And I would think that is, hey, Shirley, good to see you. And I would think that's largely because of a couple things. One is gray areas are simply harder to deal with. This is just fundamental to my work. If I don't know which path to take, let's say it's not clear which one is up and which one is down. If I'm unclear, um, I'm stalled. I'm taxing myself. I'm using consciousness to figure out which path to take. Your mic is off and we're hearing audio through another mic somewhere. I know that, and it's frustrating as heck to me. Uh, Jeff, be cool. Kyle's a very sensitive person. No, I don't know why we're having this trouble with audio. I've checked everything that's ever worked badly for it before. I think somehow is that the source of it? I don't know I don't know. This is just, oh, good Lord. Sorry about that, Kyle. And it cuts into my mojo to know that you're not hearing my dulcet tones at the peak of quality. Oh, let me see if there's one other thing I could try here. That didn't change it, I don't bet. All right. So we're dealing with this. Yes, I'm guessing that's true, but the problem I'm finding with YouTube Live is it doesn't allow me to change it midstream. The only way I could change it at this point, from what I can tell, is to actually end this podcast and create another one, which is frustrating. Okay. And also, there was a whole complication with my cameras where I tested and tested to make sure it didn't freeze, and then it froze 5 minutes before the end, having passed all prior tests. Sheesh. Anyway, so we're talking about, so one version of it is that life is experienced in gradations. That is, but we end up rounding up or rounding down. And all of this relates to how I think about the Trumpists and what they're doing. They have certainly rounded black and white. Hannah Arendt says that the authoritarians can't distinguish fact from fiction. I think that's wrong. And once again, this is a case where I'm thinking about motivations and about how we gotta be fussy about our words. Is it that they can't? No, they're really good at distinguishing fact from fiction. They do it wrong, but it's extremely black and white. Anything that comforts them, like a downhill slope that, downhill all the way. I don't have to, just cruising down, rolling down the hill to Asolia. Um, that's true. Anything that's easy for me is true, is reality. Anything that's hard for me is fake news. So you're hearing an extreme version of what I think we all have to do. And we have to also resist it. Now, Jeff, you were talking about math. One of the problems I have with math is with the two. I'll just mention two problems that Terry and I have with math. Um, it's a wonderful system. It's a powerful tool. It is, the world is not doing math. The universe is not doing math. The math is not the territory. But there are two things about it. One is it's discrete. Even if you're doing statistics, you're working with numbers that are actually, there's no continuity between them, or there's no ultimate continuity. You get finer and finer grain with it, but you're still dealing with every number is a distinct position. It's either this number or that number. And yes, we have ways to round back to uncertainty. Calculus would be a way of creating imagining a continuity. But it does tend to make us more binary, or think in more discrete terms. Either you're this or you're that. Either you're my ally or you're my enemy. And you get into all sorts of strange problems with that because, for example, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, not when there are more factors than two, but that's an appetite to make everything binary. And not only that, now there's all the technology to do it. The other problem with math is that the variables all have to be assigned. There is no, so we need to make a distinction between data, which is about something, it's been assigned to a category, and the sheer numbers or measurements that precede it. All of this relates to this issue that the topic is called abduction. It's how we decide, for example, that Jeff Cheney is Jeff Cheney. How I decide that Rob is Rob, or Shirley is Shirley, or Kyle's Kyle. How does a mind do that? It's a area in formal logic, but it's like an orphan. Hardly anyone talks about it. When they talk about it, they don't talk about it with much clarity. It is, if you read what philosophers say about abduction, it is inference to the best explanation. So I'm going to go down this rabbit hole for a second. I think it's very related to what Jeff Cheney's saying, and I also think it's related to the challenges of writing, which also can have this binary quality or appeal to our binary nature. I'm saying that a human would like to resolve to a clarity about what's what. And we do this through this unconscious fundamental level of logic, which is distinction making. So from my perspective, life has to start with indistinguishability. We don't perceive distinctions. The autogen, our model for the simplest possible system that is trying, not trying as well as Jeff is, but it's still trying to stay alive. It cannot distinguish between good and bad environments for it to open up and metabolize it. So indistinguishability is the ground. In the beginning, everything is everything. We can't make a distinction. Then organisms make distinctions, but they don't do it the way we do with language. With language, we have categories. Jeff is Jeff. That's a proper noun. Trumpus is a proper noun too. But even if I say it's sunny out or it's raining, I am using words to delineate categories. And that is not how organisms do it. Other organisms, they don't have language. They do it by threshold effect. Take the bacterium that swims up the glucose gradient. There's a bacterium, and it's got two modes of behavior. And it relies on differential sugar concentration, sucrose, on one side of it versus the other. If it senses, it doesn't have feelings or thoughts. If it senses a difference, it will swim in the direction of the difference. If it cannot tell a difference, it tumbles. It just rolls around randomly. That's a threshold effect. It's not like it's got a category in its brain. If there's a sugar gradient, then move towards it. It's not doing if-then computer coding. But with language, we talk a lot in terms of if it's this category, then it's that response. If if they're showing up late, then I have time to park my car. All of that stuff is done with categorization. So we're talking about how you come to what's in semiotics is called iconicity. This is the same as that. It's like an icon for a trash can. Iconicity is indistinguishability. So when I talk to Jeff here, I have rounded to the assumption that Jeff is the Jeff I talked to last week. So if you can pay attention to this topic, it's really important. It's like the ground. And notice how it plays out in an absolutist. An absolutist has decided that they are in the category of absolutely good because they put on some ornamentation or they saw the light or had some grand experience that thrills them and uplifts them and makes them realize they're the good guy, not the bad guy. Notice how that kind of categorization goes on. And then you get the people, I got it from a leftist and a right winger this week, who say, well, you shouldn't categorize. Or you shouldn't generalize. Okay, well, I want to say that this is a fundamental problem with abduction, which is we are generalizing and I could make a mistake. For example, Jeff could be an imposter. Or I can undergeneralize. And the people who say you're making assumptions and assumptions make an ass of you and me are making an assumption and they're missing the point. You cannot just try to imagine what it would be if you're not making assumptions or generalizing. You'd be insane. You'd be psychotic. We need to make assumptions. We want to make assumptions. We want people to make assumptions about us. As we send cultural mating signals, I want to be stereotyped. I do not want to be mistaken for a bank teller or a banker. I mean, just look at these mating calls. Look at this stuff. So we're sending those signals. We want generalization. We want the right ones, not the wrong ones. And to do that, we have to deal with our motivation to do what Hannah Arendt says. Fail to distinguish between real and imaginary. I don't think it's because we can't. It's because we would prefer to do it in self-flattering ways. Okay. Just when I thought I was over imposter syndrome, right? That's a good one. I like that. Our numbers are based on the power of 10, and the number of digits on our hands seems teleodynamic. Yes. So notice how that works. What do we mean by teleodynamic here? We mean that we're trying, and we are. So in physics, there's the law of least work. Water rolls straight downhill; it doesn't take bypasses and sort of things like that. The Tao was basically built on law of least action. That's what it's called. For humans, laws of least effort. So that's one reason why we generalize. We have to generalize. We have to have habits of assumption about what we're dealing with and how to respond to it. And you've probably heard me say this before. Simply speaking, all organisms are habit accumulating. That is, that bacterium I described a minute ago has assumptions. They're not conscious, they're not felt, but it still has these habits. We call them adaptations. And they are designed they evolve for maximum benefit for least effort. So law of least effort is a big thing for us. And so we are all habit accumulating. That's what natural selection and inverse Darwinism is about, how we accumulate habits. Animals have feelings and therefore have this secondary system by which to accumulate habits. You hear this in Skinner's work, in just the power of yuck and yum to change our habits. I'm turning on the light to get a little more, not that much. Come on, please now. Boy, I thought I was better prepared today, and it turns out I was worse. So All life is habit accumulating. Animal life is habit seeking. I'm arguing humans are habit jonesing. We need habits as fast as we can get them because our world is so complicated. And so notice what happens when you get a macro habit the way that anybody who has seen the light, who has woken up, has. Think about how beneficial, how efficient this habit is. Christian is good, I'm good, therefore I'm Christian. I'm now in the category of Christian and good. I now have a master excuse. I can do whatever I want, trusting that it's good because I'm Christian, or MAGA, or mindful. It's not about the topic, not about the lifestyle brand or anything like that. It's the relief of the breakthrough. That's what woke really means. It's branded as what the left stands for, and it's branded in opposite directions, because I get these memes from people saying, yes, I'm woke, I'm proud to be woke, I'm for liberty and generosity and all that sort of stuff. And in the meantime, it's being slammed as exclusively a problem, a deadly problem, a horrible virus, says Musk, that is killing the country. It's either bad or good. I'm saying no. If you look at what woke really means, it is the ultimate macro abduction. I feel a breakthrough. What did I break through? I break through my imposter syndrome, because I now recognize I now recognize that I'm one of the good guys. I have my master excuse. No deed too dirty for one of my kind of people. That's a categorization move. It could end civilization, or whatever you want to call this that we have now or had. So all of that relates to this thing about probabilities. And so I'm just going to come back to abduction for a minute to show you how familiar it is, how intuitive it is. It happens intuitively. I go to a parking lot. I happen to have a white Prius. I'm not a car person. My son has reminded me I'm not a car person. I have a 2010 white Prius. And that's a popular car, especially in Berkeley. So I walk up to a car, and how am I recognizing it as mine? Because it has traits in common with mine, just like Jeff today has traits in common with the Jeff I talked to last week, including, for example, his mating call, which is whenever he shows up, he says trying. Okay, so now I've got these attributes. So this car is like my car. They seem the same because they're both white Priuses, and they're both dirty because I don't wash my car enough. And then I know, and the key isn't working. So I've got this question about why the key isn't working. Maybe the battery died on it. And then I look in the back seat, and there's a difference, which is that there's a baby seat back there. I don't have a baby anymore. So I don't have a baby seat. I realize that the car is not mine. Murder mysteries are all based on those kinds of false abductions. Jokes are based on those kinds of false abductions. Identity politics is all based on on what you could say is true or false abduction. So the resistance versus the Nazis, I'd say that's a useful distinction to make. We have to make black and white decisions a lot. We do come to forks in the road. But sometimes we overdo it. We round to black and white because of the relief we get from it. Murder mysteries, just think about how that works. The murderer had this attribute, the suspect has this attribute. You accumulate attributes. The problem with abduction is it's never complete. It's always more or less. That is, you're more or less the same Jeff I dealt with last week. And this is another place where you get in trouble, because you have a habit of abduction, which is my wife or my husband is reliable, trustworthy, present for me, safe. And then you can get a flip. I mean, you can get really big flips. I have a friend who's dealt with the biggest flip that I've ever heard about in a spousal relationship. Like turn on a dime, 180 degrees, really challenging. You know, you think you know a person. I think I know Jeff, and it turns out He's a plant. No. So spy movies are about that. I've been rewatching The Americans and loving it. And it's all about who to trust. Who do you know this way or that? The problem with, so I am arguing in general that we are waiting for a third scientific revolution, that we've had two, and they deal with the other areas of logic. So the first one was the area of deduction. And it would be the most obvious one because it gives us this black and white sense of things. Deduction. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This is formal logic at its best. This is exactly what Plato and Aristotle and everybody else is trying to work out. And before them, even Pythagoras is trying to work out. I want the rigorous rules by which I know for certain whether something falls in this category or that category. It's exactly what you get from any intelligent life form anywhere in the universe. The first thing that by intelligent, I mean they're using words. That means they're using categories, and they would be drawn to the ease you get when you have deduction, because deduction is airtight. If all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, there is no way that Socrates is not mortal. Try it as Venn diagrams. You got this category called mortal, and within it, you've got this category called men, because we know all men are mortal. I really, if you got a pen nearby, try this out. It's really important. It is some of the most important tools you can get for training your intuition. It's the three things I'm going to talk about here and how they play out. So deduction, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So what you've got is circles within circles. You got this little circle that's Socrates, he's completely man, and then man is completely mortal. There's no way that Socrates couldn't be mortal. That's the joy we would get from absolute clarity. And it was the aspiration for 2,500 years of philosophy that we could actually start with some absolutely true axioms and work out everything. Everything would follow from it. And it hasn't died, even though it's been pronounced that the appetite is huge in us for that degree of certainty. And it's a very useful tool. It's how we do our engineering, would include a lot of this, but I have to go to the other two areas. Where did we get our axioms? So think about Euclidean geometry. It starts with 5 axioms. 4 of them are kind of self-defining. One of them's a little iffy, this thing about parallel lines never connecting. But where do we get them from anyway? Induction. This is the second scientific revolution. The first scientific revolution was imposing rigor on formalism. That's what deduction does. But where do we get our axioms? How do we decide that all men are mortal? That's an axiom. We started with that assumption. How do we decide that Socrates was a man? Okay, so induction is how we came up with all men are mortal. Induction is, and for this, really, it's worth writing down, because if you get this in your head, I swear, if you get this in your gut, it's been useful for me. I think you'll find it useful for you, and it'll also, yeah. So induction, you reverse the sequence on those things. Socrates is a man. Socrates is mortal. Therefore, all men are mortal. Okay. You can see that's a little dodgy. Try this out. I go on a date with Jeff Cheney because he's trying. So I go on a date with Jeff Cheney, and it's really good. So I said, date with Cheney. Let's see, I'm going to do this. Jeff is a date. Dates with Jeff are. I'm gonna have a little trouble working this out, but you'll be able to work it out. I've got one instance of it being fun to have a date with Jeff. Okay, one instance, and I'm going to generalize that all dates with Jeff are good. Okay, that's why I like the dates with him, because he's laughing so hard he can hardly catch his breath. I like tickling people. It's where I get my endorphin. So this is the problem. You think of how obviously challenging this is. It has to do with the incompleteness of induction. How many dates do I have to go on with Jeff Cheney before I can conclude reliably that Jeff dates are fun? It's open-ended. It's not always open-ended. I have this wallet here, and if I wanted to check whether all the bills in my wallet are $20 bills, I could check and I would come to a complete set of them. But how many men do I have to test before I'm absolutely sure that all men are mortal? Well, all of them. Same with sunset. Same with the misfortune of a turkey. A turkey has the experience of the farmer coming every day. This is a Bertrand Russell point. And every day brings food. And so the turkey comes to the conclusion that when the farmer comes, it's food, except that he comes the day before Christmas and slits his throat. This is a real burden. This is induction. And we got a second scientific revolution that was all about induction. What is induction? You're testing out cases to generalize to conclusions. And so there is all of the probability about some of the dates with Jeff are good, some of them are not so good. You got all that complication, but I'm going to keep it simple. We don't have to deal with that at this point. Okay, so how did I come to the conclusion that all men are mortal? Well, I had a sampling of men. And by the time I get to the depletion of my wallet of men, where they're all dead, the question is moot anymore. I mean, I could say well, first of all, I wouldn't be here to say anything. But so you see this problem with induction. So I'm going to bring around, and so now try this out with a Venn diagram. So you got Socrates in the middle, and he's both mortal and men. And so you kind of are squeezing together the more instances of man, that is both man and mortal, the more overlap there is between man and mortality. But you never get complete enclosure until you've depleted the category. So there's all these other men or all these other sunsets. So every sunset has been similar, but tomorrow could be different, especially because of the Iranian war. Okay, now, so we had a scientific revolution that brought rigor to formalism. Then we had a scientific revolution. Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. I set the whole thing up, then it failed, and I'm just trying to figure out where it could possibly. No, that doesn't do it. I'm just looking for where. I mean, does this make it sound louder? Now I have no idea where it's coming from. This is frustrating as hell. I'm just sorry. I really put some time in on the video because last week was freezing. This week, oh, is this better? Okay, I don't know what was better. This is better. Is that what you're saying? Okay, then it's coming through my freaking. Okay, all right. I'm just getting a little closer to it. Now that I know where I'm shouting. Okay, and this means that you'll see my ugly mug up close and personal, which is great for my nose because my nose is already big, but the screen really, look at that thing, look at that beak. Yes, I have back trouble. Okay, but let's get serious here. Come on, you guys. So, deduction. We brought rigor to formalism through Pythagoras and all of those guys. Induction, the scientific revolution as we know it. And the problem in science and in life everywhere is that we haven't brought rigor to abduction, and it's understandable that we haven't. Abduction, again, remember, is how we recognize something, how we generalize to categories. Okay, so let me reverse again those categories. Socrates is mortal, man is mortal, therefore Socrates is man. Now try the Venn diagram for that. So you got a circle that's mortal, and you got man and Socrates floating around inside it. They're both mortal. And now you're going to say somehow that they are the same? Uh, what we're doing with abduction, and we do this intuitively, and it's the foundation of logic. Even though, as word using people, we think of deduction as the foundation. No, when you think biologically, organisms have to be able to make distinctions, the differences that make a difference to what they do. But they don't start with them. They're not programmed into them. The simplest organism would barely be able to distinguish. So I could even describe how, in our theory, about what would be the minimal system that is trying, what it can do. It's got two moves in its repertoire. So this is basically a chain reaction that happens to produce side product molecules that can capture some of the molecules that start the chain reaction. We call it an autogen, a self-regenerator, which means that it's closed and dormant, in a simplification. And then if it breaks open in the presence of energy and resources, it can turn into the chain reaction. Then the chain reaction resumes, and it starts producing more of the shell molecules, the molecules that simply self-assemble, the same molecules that viruses have. We see this as a non-parasitic virus. And so you end up with this these things. It's got a repertoire. It's either open and regenerating its closed state, or it's closed and it's regenerating, and it's got the potential, if it's busted, to regenerate its closed state. It can metabolize. It's basically seed versus metabolism. Okay, super simple. And it cannot distinguish between when to open and close. It cannot, it has no ability to recognize what's a good place to do it and what's a bad place to do it. But we have an explanation for how you could get it to where it had a more likely to open in the presence of the chemicals it can turn into more chain reaction. That would be, from our perspective, the first abduction. And it's done by threshold effect. It has to break down the molecules that are good for regenerating it, that can be used to regenerate the chain reaction, happen to stick to the side, which makes the side a little more likely to break open. It's a question of degree. Okay, so abduction is using attributes in common to assume that two things are like each other. That Socrates is a man. Socrates is mortal. Man is mortal. Therefore, Socrates is man. Very iffy. Movies often play with this. That is, they're always playing with mistaken identity. Like I said, jokes are playing with this too. The example I usually use, and you've probably heard it from me before, so don't give me a hard time about it, or else, and especially not Jeff, because we're dating, and I wouldn't want a buzzkill from him. But I'm gonna have to tell this joke again. The guy's out on a Saturday afternoon, just like us, but it's sunny out, and he's out mowing the lawn, and his wife calls to him from upstairs from the bedroom, and says, "Will you please come upstairs?" He comes upstairs, and she says, "Will you take off my blouse?" And he takes off her blouse. "Will you take off my bra?" And he takes off her bra. "Will you take off my skirt?" And he takes off her skirt. And she says, "I never want to see you wearing my clothes again." Notice the bait and switch. Everything about it, all the attributes of it sounded like a seduction, and also stirred some anxiety in us. Because it was a little dirty. And then it relieves in this weirdest way, where it's kind of a relief, but it's also even racier, that he's out mowing the lawn dressed as a woman. Jokes have that quality. Any movie that's got twin brothers or sisters will tend to have that problem. Not the Craze story, not that one starring Tom Hardy. Those are very distinguishable brothers. But if they're identical twins, you're in for a mistaken identity kind of thing. Now, here's the problem. Abduction, there is always the possibility that there is some attribute that you didn't foresee that makes all the difference. And mysteries are always doing exactly what that joke just did. They lead you down the garden path thinking you're sure that this is the murderer, And then you notice one reason why they can't and one reason why someone else is, and that's how you get your resolution. So we're delighted by this stuff. It's where our fallibilism is at its worst. It's also where it's extremely good. That is, we're really good at this stuff. I mean, just think of how many habits of assumption you deal with every day. For example, that you can't walk through walls, but you can walk through doors. I mean, it's just endless quantities of these things. And it's an area that science has not yet gotten around to, which is why I'm suggesting that it's the third scientific revolution. And I think that there is a solution. I see it in Terry's approach to the science. I think he is turning a lot of philosophical questions, if not all of them, into scientific questions by means of careful abduction. What do I mean by careful abduction? Anybody can categorize anything that they want. In philosophy, for example, you can simply declare that there's this phenomena, and then you just start to describe it, and then you start to get fuzzy about the category, the equivocation in science over whether we are machines or whether we are trying, all that kind of slop that comes in when you're basically moving abstract concepts that you just invented. And notice that while I rail against the invention of this jargon, I create more of it than anyone. But there is a difference in how we do it. The intuitive abductions that we work with all day long, where I just assume that that's Jeff, or that that was my white Prius, or that I can walk through a door and not walls, all of that's done intuitively. That's a problem in science because it's so easy to categorize and then to reify, to pretend that it's a physical thing and kind of an eternal thing. You know, I just imagine where science starts. We assume God, an eternal thing. What is it actually? It's a word. We have the term infinity. I gotta say, for someone who cares about infinity as much as I do, I didn't notice the irony of to infinity and beyond until 2 days ago. um, okay, and it is the camera. Okay, I'm gonna get a little closer. So what is our solution to bringing rigor to abduction? It's that you have to start somewhere with some assumptions, some categories of behavior. You have to use minimal interpretation, just as stripped down as possible. And then once you start from that, you have to be able to explain how all categories emerge from it. So I don't get to simply pull out my butt whatever category I name and use it as an unexplained explanation for something, which is all we do with God. We say, okay, well, there's a mysterious behavior I haven't figured out, so I'm going to say God did it. Or what we do with motivation. Why did I do that? I had this motivation. Okay. No, I have to be able to explain motivation from the ground. And what is my ground? I can get fussy about it. I did last night with a friend at the Terry's Going Away party. We had a wonderful party here for Terry, and people came in from Salt Lake City and further away to say goodbye to him because he's moving out of the Bay Area, and I will be losing my walks with him. But my grounding is basically the second law of thermodynamics, which gives you a bunch of things that it gives you a few things. It gives you locality. It gives you energy gradients. When things are falling apart, there is potential energy that is dissipating. If you can capture that potential energy, then you can use it to do work. So just out of the second law of thermodynamics, and every time, so this is simply that there are more randomized or unconstrained or patternless configurations of any population of things than there are regularized or regular patterns, like a ruler. This was so if you've got stuff that is moving around statistically anywhere in the universe, it's likely to fall into randomness. So this is the second law of thermodynamics. I often will suggest that the way to think about it is you got an aligned box of toothpicks, and you toss the toothpicks into the water, chances are good they will not be aligned for long because there's motion and they will misalign. If you start from that, not from toothpicks, but from the second law, which is actually, as I call it, the first law of everything, flow. Um, I have to explain everything up from that. So I have to, if I want to use a category like information, I have to explain how it emerges. I don't get to posit it as a other substance that is everywhere or nowhere or only somewhere like in life. I have to explain it with nothing but what precedes it. And I have to explain it in strictly physical terms. And I have been on a campaign to do that all the way from the second law of thermodynamics to assholes, and with no skipped steps. There are steps, no skipped, what I want to say is no skipped categories. So, for example, Terry was at the party last night, and he's going to, after he finished his book on falling up, which you talked about before, he's writing a book on semiotics, how information comes into being. And he thought at first he would call it How Information Lost Its Meaning, which is all about the digital revolution, which is where all this stuff started. All of that AI stuff, where we don't know what information is, we just use it like as the explanation for everything. And I said, hey, I have an idea for your title of your book. And he said, and I said, hermenology. It's an obvious term. I coined it, and there's no other records of it, but it's so fucking obvious. Hermeneutics is the study of right interpretation. What is the best way to interpret the Bible or anything? Hermeneutics. Hermenology is the study of the emergent and nature of interpretation. There is no information in the world or in another world that gets poured into here. There is interpretation. Anything can become information, but it only is information when it is for a self. He teased me back because it was a party and said, yeah, you're just trying to get it to be called terminology, not hermenology. He'll think about it. I don't bet he'll use it. But think of how these fields start out. Epistemology, the study of knowledge, the philosophy of knowledge. What is it really doing? It's studying. They can't get off this fucking question. What is the deductive process by which you can figure out justified true belief? They're not, the tendency to look away from the question of how do we what knowledge is about interpretation. How did that even start? They're not doing that. The whole free will determinism question, ignoring the question of what is willpower. It's not energy. It's not the coffee I drank or toast I ate this morning. What is willpower? They don't even pay attention to that question. Hermeneutics, they want the best interpretation. Deduction, we want the best way to logically figure out what's true. That would be the human appetite. Why? Because of the law of least effort played out in habit jonesing's creatures. The universe is an incredible clusterflux to us human beings. Terrifying. I want habits as fast as I can get them. And so I'm thinking we need to bring greater rigor to abduction. And it needs a better name, and it's not categorization, because categorization happens only at the highest level in human beings, only in language. I don't mean the highest level in terms of who's good and who's bad, but I mean in language, in symbols, we can do the categorization that other organisms don't do. They are working with, if Pavlov's dog, or if you tell your dog you want to take a walk, they're doing a kind of an indexical association. If they hear a sound that's more or less in this range, it suggests that this is going to happen. But if you mumble it, it doesn't cross the threshold. We can't precisely source our initial instinct towards an action, I guess. I would suggest something different about that. But we've had delightful rounds before. We can't precisely source our initial instinct toward an action. Okay, so what? Good. Here's where I find resonance with what you're saying. What I want to do is really unclear to me. I never do anything for just one reason. I can usually find a cheater's move and a virtue move for anything I do. And its consequences are all over the place, too. My dad described it as life is like playing piano with oven mitts on. Um, so if anybody asks me what motivated me to do something, um, well, I could go spelunking around inside my mind and find a motivation, probably a flattering one, an admirable one. I probably won't come out with my most vulgar motivation for doing something. That's a central theme in my work. Is that I think we're scared to talk about our need for self confidence. I'm clearly doing this in part for the mojo motivation I get from it. It is a fuel for my willpower. Not when the audio doesn't work, but it doesn't. But it's still a fuel for my willpower. You can see how enthusiastic I'm getting, my mojo, my confidence. But I might say, no, I'm doing this to teach the world because I want to make the world a better place. I would come up with that, and that's a reason too. Really interesting question about this. If I have an ulterior motive, does it crowd out any potential for a virtue motive? That is, if I have a ulterior motive that is sufficient to motivate me, does that mean I don't have also a good motive? I haven't got a great answer to that one, and we deal with it all the time. Oh, you're just trying to do this. Oh, you're just playing politics, as if it rules out all other possibilities. Notice how the word just works that way. Just means ignore all other possibilities. You're just doing this. No, I'm just trying to teach the world good things. So we got that problem as you describe it. And I'm suggesting something deeper. Because notice, if you unpack your words, you've got your initial instinct toward an action. Okay, so I just interpreted it one way, which is, yeah, I can't tell exactly why I do the things I do. Um, uh, but there's also what is the initial instinct towards, I'm not going to say action, I'm going to say towards effort. What is trying and how did it start? It's such a simple question. We assume that it was answered um, by Darwin, but it wasn't. And he knew it wasn't. He assumed the struggle, the instinct towards action, he assumed it. He said he assumed it. And since then, we've talked as though his capacity to talk about how we speciate explained it. So, I talk to high level scientists who still talk like this. And you can't tell what the original trying is when they're talking because they're kind of vague on it. Three possibilities. One is that you're not trying. It's a mechanistic instinct towards action, which is not distinguished from effort. Okay? Or it's the DNA trying, or it's natural selection trying. DNA is not trying. Natural selection is not trying. We're trying. Hi, Niels. It's great to see you. And I'm sorry the audio is so bad on here. There were all sorts of kerfuffles this morning, and that's how it goes. Hey, but I was trying. Okay, so what is trying and how did it start? By the way, Niels, this was a lot about Terry's work. Niels is very interested in Terry's work and this whole approach to bringing rigor to abduction. Let's see, I think I can add something in here that is see if I can do this. It's a link to one of my articles. Yeah, this is one of my videos that deals with bringing rigor to abduction. Instincts may have multiple reasons, selfish and unselfish, but no matter how many reasons, we can't watch the instinct appear in ourselves because we're aware of the only after it appears. Yes and no. And what I'm saying is, so I don't know how much I don't know when you joined this thing, but I'm saying that this is a problem largely because we're doing it only at the level of human behavior. We're not paying attention to what precedes it. So, for example, take this definition of abduction, which is the common definition. Inference to the best explanation. That is a very different version of what I'm talking about than this whole thing about whether I recognize that white Prius as my car or something else. That whole joke about the lawnmower guy. What am I talking about? To me and to Peirce, who developed this, Peirce was all over the map about it, but at one point he says what it is exactly what I said, which is you are, because of traits in common, you are iconizing two things. You're recognizing them as one and the same or in the same category. Since Socrates is mortal and man is mortal, Socrates is man. And you could continue to add attributes to strengthen your abduction, your unifying of those things. So, okay, Socrates is Socrates. Socrates walks on 2 feet. Man walks on 2 feet. Socrates is hairy. Man is hairy. You add more attributes, but what I'm saying is, no matter how many of these features or properties they have in common, they still might not be in common. They may be actually different. There may be a difference that makes a difference about them. But what I'm also arguing here, and this is to Amethyst's point, organisms are not inferring to the best explanation. Explanation is something we do with language. And we completely ignore this. If you look up the Stanford philosophy dictionary description of abduction, it's all done at the human level. And what I'm inviting you to do through the work that we do here, these conversations and elsewhere, is visit this other question. Another way to come at how to abduce, how to decide what is what, is if you start simple as possible and are really careful never to smuggle in any categories that you pull out your butt to resolve problems, like calling things motivation or instinct or all of this. You have to explain all of that stuff. I'm not denying that they're real. I'm saying you have to explain them from what precedes them. So before I was working with Terry, I had already read all these people who said, yeah, we look at all the chemistry inside of us, and the chemistry is not motivated. It doesn't have willpower. And we cannot find a locus of it, a single unit of it anywhere. And that's the mystery of consciousness. And I'm saying, yeah, the mystery gets that's what they call the hard problem of consciousness. And I call it the made harder problem of consciousness. If you start at the level of human beings and think of us as just matter in motion with no motivations that preceded us, like animals are just machines, which is what Descartes thought. We still are stuck on that idea. Yeah, you're going to have a hell of a time figuring out what consciousness is. If, on the other hand, you start with the second law of thermodynamics and figure out what the first trying being could ever be, then you might get a purchase on consciousness, and I think we have. Okay, so let's see. Nils, can we watch video later where he stays in class to clean the erasers with Kyle? You don't know this. Nils lives in Sweden, and Sweden cuts you more slack than that. Ain't a torture country like ours. Okay, what I've done here is gotten very long-winded about all the stuff that followed from Jeff's questions, because I'm hoping I can get a second date with him. And I would like to move to anywhere that you find interesting. But while I wait for you to pose some idea or thought or something you're playing with this week, I will also give you a little sense of how I think about willpower from the ground up. So we had a party last night, and I ended up with a bag of kettle chips that nobody ate, so I ate them this morning a lot. The kettle chips, you can imagine if you started a fire with them, you lit a match under them, they could start a fire that would burn down my house, right? I mean, that's energy. And energy is capable of doing lots of things, but energy mostly degenerates things. So yeah, there's power involved, but it's not like it's just energy. And there are all these people who talk like, well, good energy, bad energy, that sort of thing. But energy is actually indifferent. It's not trying to do anything. But it's part of the equation. It is capable of doing work and therefore has power. Now, what is will then? Well, it's how I channel that energy. I channel it into work that I prefer, and most fundamentally, the work that I've preferred since the origins of life, me and my kind, meaning the living. I put it into work to ability to regenerate my ability to channel energy into work. That's what I think you are. I always say that's what I think I am, but I actually think that's what you are too. And also a potato bug. I mean, I'm saying that what trying is constraints that channel energy into effort to maintain, to regenerate the constraints we are. I limit what I do today with the hope that tomorrow I will have the ability to limit what I do tomorrow. And yes, so it's a battle against entropy, but I also want to point out this. It uses entropy production against itself. Because remember, I ate those kettle chips. I turned them into poop. That is degenerating them. That is, I'm harvesting the free energy off of them as I degenerate them. I'm using the second law of thermodynamics against itself. That's my willpower. Now, notice this about religion and all of that. We talk about God's will, and we try to detail out what God wants. We never talk about how he manifested on earth. We just kind of assume it. God's will be done. How? We don't work out the mechanisms of that. We abstract. We can do that. We can simply gloss over it. He's got that power. He can pull strings, but they're not strings. But it's magical kind of energy. What I'm saying is that notice that what I've got there is, for my willpower, it's a interaction between energy and constraints. Energies that I use to regenerate the constraints that enable me to channel energy into channeling the constraints into work. So that's what I think you are. You're all sorts of layers of that kind of stuff on top of that. You're not a potato bug. I'll grant you that. But that's what you have in common with all life, not only here, but everywhere in the universe, because job one for life anywhere in the universe would be dealing with the first law of everything. The first law of everything, which is that order degenerates. So if you're going to stick around and you're not, if you're not just durable, you'll stick around by regenerating yourself. Okay. Now, as I said, what's the best explanation video you've ever made for Terry Deacon's theory about how trying specifically emerges from matter? Okay, so the best one I did was I got an opportunity to do a Google talk. And I fussed over it a lot. And I did it in two 20-minute sections. This is one of those brown bag lunch things there. And I do it in two sections. The first one is framing up the problem, the thing that has been eluding us all this time, which is basically explaining willpower, what are selves in trying, what are selves making functional interpretive effort. They all come out together. They all define each other. From chemistry, which is not trying to do anything. Chemistry doesn't make functional interpretive effort. Life does. That's a problem we haven't dealt with. That's a problem you're going to have to deal with AI and all of this with my Google talk. Then I stopped for 10 minutes of questions. And then I laid out the most simple, this was a few years ago, so the simplest version of Terry's approach, including some simulations, or they're actually emulations. They're computer graphics. That were developed by a Google scientist who got interested in Terry's work and said, let me program up something like this, and wanted to create a model for us to work out the different parameters on it. The reason I'm reluctant to do it is that I'm not at my best in this presentation. I don't think I suffered from stage fright. I didn't feel like it beforehand. I started too fast. I was worried about time. So I don't really relax. I'm running a little on fumes at the beginning of it. I wasn't completely at ease simply because I started too fast. Um, so that would be a good place to look. And if you email me, I could probably think of some others. I've done some short videos that lay it out. Um, but and we are still revising, changing the model. A lot of our work in recent weeks has been on how I talked about a little bit how we go from Fuca to Luca. Luca is the last universal common ancestor. We're arguing that the autogen, this model I've just described, the chain reaction that has a side effect of producing encapsulations that might capture enough of the chain reaction molecules that it regenerates when it breaks open. Super simple model. It has to be simple. There's no engineers, no evolution. It's just got to be it's trying that starts or purpose that starts by accident. That's how it would have to start. So, but we were working out. So we think of the first universal common ancestor as one of these non-parasitic viruses. It's basically a chain reaction that makes cells and alternates between chain reacting and closure, static seed-like state. But we're also working out the pre-Fuca world, which is how you'd ever get peptides down to earth. And this is the exact reverse of how most scientists think about it. They think that we have to start with amino acids. We suspect that actually it'll start with that there would be peptides that would be products of uh, hydrogen cyanide that would be produced on the cooler planets outside, towards the outer side of the solar system, and then through meteor action would arrive to a hotter environment where the peptides would take a different form, and they're really productive for both the creation of template molecules like RNA, but also the proteins that become functional. Hydrogen cyanide. I mean, there's a video. If I had a link to it right here, I'd give it to you. That lays out this hunch that actually life starts with a poison that we have to get from the cooler planets that arrive here, and it also um, uh, yes, I'll tell you about that conference because it relates a little bit to all of this. But uh, it suggests that you don't need a lucky planet. You actually there's some likelihood of life given the nature of solar systems and the interaction. You could say if you turn it into purposeful stuff, it's like a symbiotic, the win-win for life, not for the matter, of this Goldilocks variation between the planets further from the sun and the planet closer to the sun, that would actually be a reason why there'd be life all the way, a lot more life than you might expect if you're just looking for a lucky planet. We're talking about a feature of solar systems that makes it likely. Now, the Vienna conference was interesting for me, and it relates to what we're talking about here. Thank you for bearing with me, you guys, because of the audio. It's very hard for me to listen to difficult audio, probably because my hearing's bad. But thank you for bearing with me. And I will get to one thing about assholery in a bit. The conference was two kinds of people, both of them philosophers. There were the philosophers of science. These are people who are trying to understand how science works, what its role is, and how to make it work better. So you can say that's kind of the epistemology side of things. How do we shop among interpretations? How can we do it better? And in today's long, tedious lecture, I have offered a way. We need a third scientific revolution. We got to get more rigorous about abduction from the ground up. How we actually come up with what we call identity. That Socrates is man, or that I'm a Democrat, or whatever. How we categorize as humans, but also how to perceive that. That's philosophy of science sort of stuff. The other part were natural philosophers. And for a while, I was having trouble figuring out the relationship between the two. And then I realized that no, it's exactly what I've been thinking about all along, which is, so what we're doing is trying to figure out the ontology of epistemology. What does ontology mean? It means what exists, what really exists. Epistemology is trying. It's trying to, it's, when we talk about knowledge, we're actually talking, I'm an evolutionary epistemologist. We're talking about everything from the simplest adaptation all the way out to what you know in your field of in your job or some idea you have. We're talking about all of that. So we're trying to understand how we understand, right or wrong, how we do it. See the problem there? It's eating your mouth. I'm a self trying to figure out what selves are. I am looking for the best interpretation of best and interpretation. That is, I'm trying to figure out better explanations for what better and worse are. For example, you've got the people who think that better and worse, good and bad, were there at the origins of the universe. But I'm saying, no, there's no better or worse if there aren't selves. For whom they're better or worse. You got to have a beneficiary. And I'm also trying to interpret the nature of interpretation, and I'm doing that as an interpreter. Yes, that's right, and I'll argue it's not right. The whole school of thought that argues this. Interesting guy named not Ron Swenson, who argues that life is a entropy maximizing system. And yeah, it's a reasonable intuition if you are. First of all, I got to say, any system that does work is producing more entropy. That is, I am creating more disorder in my effort to maintain my internal order. And if you look at humans, we're really blowing through a whole lot of fossil fuels right now. So yeah, we are increasing entropy. But where those fossil fuels come from, that's actually potential energy stored. That is past order that has been in effect fossilized. Okay, and harvestable by us. So Swenson argues, and he's not alone in this. I met with another, there are others who talk like this. Jeremy England sort of talks like this. And believe it or not, Dan Brown talks like this. Dan Brown, the guy who wrote the Da Vinci Code, he wrote a book called Origins, in which he imagines that we're trying to bring about 1,000 points of light's entropy. He doesn't recognize the difference between heat death and entropy. He sees it like a fireworks show. It's pathetic. But anyway, no, life is bringing about order. If you really wanted, if life was here to increase entropy, it's an incredibly inefficient way to do it. What you want to do is blow shit up. Just blow the whole thing up. Race to the heat death. That's a more efficient thing than anything we do. We are busy sequestering energy and order. We're maintaining that stuff to where you could burn my body at the end of my life because it's still got all this potential in it. It's not getting rid of it the way that, let's say, a whirlpool does. A whirlpool dissipates energy faster because of it's just regular, and it's not trying to use that energy to keep itself going. I'm trying to keep myself going. That means I have to use that energy. That means I'm storing it. That potential energy. I think the irony about the Tibetan dog was going to do nothing for me in protection, sleeping over my head. I don't know where that comes from. I'm trying to figure out what that is. Since entropy, vibes lose cannon. Okay, well, there you go. Now I have a laboratory. Okay. Yeah, I don't understand. Okay, so we're winding down. I mean, feel free to try to make it clearer. I'm just looking to see whether it's. Oh yeah, I don't understand. Yeah, I'd love to understand. I'm sure there was a thought behind it. It probably had to do with choices and willpower and irony. No, you're talking about irony. Vibes lose cannon. I get that. Yeah, the ironies are everywhere. And what do I mean by that? I'll just bring it all the way around and why I think irony is your superpower when you're dealing with Trumpists, and why irony is how you can maintain the confidence to walk through life, even though it's fucking tragic, and much more tragic for some of us than others, and much more tragic for future generations than ours. But there is at least some consolation in irony. What is an ironic situation? It's what Five Blues Cannon was just describing, which is you buy something for one reason and it turns out that it's no good for that, but it might be good for something else, or you buy something that's good and it turns out bad, or you buy something bad and it turns out good. All of those are ironic situations. They're the tickle of relief, but they are also the tragedy of dire situations, you know? Just to give you a vivid version of that, if you have a child and you have an option between two treatments, you can only mutually exclusive treatments for their cancer, and you pick one and it turns and because you think it's a better bet and the child dies, and you find out later that actually it couldn't have been the better bet. Um, uh, Bob Marley dies that way, almost. You know, he's got a sore toe. From that acts up after a soccer game. He loved to play soccer. He goes to a doctor. The doctor scares him about it. Goes to another doctor who reassures him about it. Years later, he dies of it. Not many years later. He was important to me musically. Since that, let's see. Um, those are ironic situations. I'm saying they are reducible, but they are not eliminatable. You cannot ever come up with a surefire formula for living the true secure life. That is what deduction was about. When you think about what Plato's doing, he's saying, wait, there's got to be a way to figure out what is ideal friendship, how to move towards it. Um, that's what Christianity was doing. That's what when you look at the human gut, it wants that formula. And there is no surefire formula. You can get better. That's why I'm training my gut. I'm trying to train my gut to do a better job. Look at the irony. I pull this thing closer to talk. Sorry. So an ironic attitude, or what I call a dironic attitude, is recognizing the dire humor, the tragicomic nature of life's iffiness, and in a way, making it a form of self-expression. To me, as I think about it lately, it's um, uh, admitting to and embracing my ambivalent relationship with hope or wishful thinking or magical thinking. So some of that. Been swimming in the unknown for long now, but it feels like I'm compressing, and I like the idea that what is possible today was not possible yesterday, all the way back. That's interesting. Let me think about this a minute. I don't know if it's completely accurate. You could, in a Heraclitan sense, yeah, you don't just, it's not just that you can't go into the same river twice, but you can't be, you're not the same person. So you can't step into it because the river's changed and you've changed. Still, there are habits that we do every day. But what I find in what you're saying is that the stacking order is really interesting. The stacking order of how you learn something, what you learn first. I commented to someone the other day that yeah, I learned about that idea too young. I dismissed something that I had to come back around to. Um, is also angles on my. Oh, there you go. Um, yeah, so stacking order makes a big difference. I could go that far. I could say that what is possible today was not possible yesterday, all the way back. In that subtle sense, I would say that's true. But mostly what I'm thinking about is stacking order. Let me say one more thing about stacking order and formulas before I let you go. And next time, boy, will I have my audio visuals working right. Um, uh, Back in the 90s, there were these guys who came up with this. Relates to the thing about stacking orders and all of that, and our desire for deduction, and the way we come up with rules, worded rules that are our simplification. So there were a married couple that were psychotherapists, and they came up with this argument that um, You marry the person who is going to enable you to work out the precise and particular problems you had as in your childhood with your parents. So this became for them a motivation, a useful tool for motivating the people to say, yeah, the problem you're dealing with your partner is actually is a problem you'd want to deal with. You should deal with it. You're, nose to the grindstone. You'll work through it this way. So notice that it's a formula, and it also says, so stick with it. Because if you finally got an opportunity to work out whatever you didn't work out with your parents, and it's a rare opportunity, don't divorce your partner, stick with your partner. I found it dubious. And here's why. I think we're all lifelong dealing with the same dilemmas. They show up again and again. Should I join this? Should I leave this? Should I join this? Should I not join it? Which would be true all the way down to animals having to figure. I mean, the simplest organisms figuring out what to eat, what not to. Not figuring it out, but having habits that help them behave in ways that improve their chances of dealing with the right stuff, not the wrong stuff. You can trick bacteria with sucrose, with saccharin or any of those fake sugars. They think it's sugar. So yeah, they're still dealing with ironic situations. They thought they were getting sugar, they're getting empty calories. So I'm thinking there's actually a handful of problems that we all deal with, and we don't ever resolve them. But that formula had appeal. Look, the way I framed it, I don't know if I'd still frame it this way, is look, if there were 500 different possible problems you could have in your childhood, and you end up with a partner who has the 3 that you ended up with your parents, that'd be uncanny. That would prove that there's some intuition that moves you that way. I think that everybody has experienced by 20 or 30, most everybody has experienced all the problems. Should I join this? Should I say this? Should I delay gratification? So all of that stuff, this is just what we swim in. It's the iffiness of life, and we don't get over it. We endure it and we work with it. And there are no surefire formulas. You get a good one and then it fails. And we joke about it. You know, my favorite thing to do is kind of what I'm doing here, which is speculating about a whole ball of wax and us stuck in it, laughing at us, especially Jeff, and Kyle too, and Bob and Rob, laughing at us with each other, and they're laughing at each other with each other, and also crying with each other, and not crying at each other. Yeah, crying at each other too, I guess. I mean, I haven't looked at that side of it, but I think it belongs in there. If you get the time for that in life, that's about as close I can find to satisfying. Along with, I think I said the other day in a video if you haven't, I said something, I brought up inverse projection the other day, which was, oh man, I can totally, talking to a trumpet, say, I can totally relate to what you're going through. You remember how I was with that girlfriend where I became a maniac and thought we would, we were happily ever after, and you thought it was dangerous, but I was in heaven. You're doing that. So you're not accusing me. I'm saying you're doing this thing. You're talking about your personal experience of it. I think it is worthwhile in one's life to get drunk, get into a drunk stupor or an addiction if you can get out of it. And I think most of us have at one time or another. So that's where the human laughing at and with each other, and you could say solidarity with each other, crying to each other when we're in pain, and crying together. I haven't found anything better yet. I mean, I like lots of things, but those are some possibilities. Okay, since I'm going to cut class 5 minutes early because it's my fault that the audio sucked so bad today. I'll just mention this one last thing, which is pain really hurts. We are emotional creatures way more than we are language creatures. physical pain is so damn convincing. I am convinced that philosophy has no effect on it. Emotional pain is excruciating, and I would say a lot of it is a plummeting of self-confidence. We need our self-confidence. Get it safely is what I'm arguing we should do. And I'll be back next week. Oh, one last thing. Sorry, we're having the psychoproctology meeting tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock California time, as usual. It's right here. Even if you haven't emailed me and gotten the mailing list, feel free to join us. There's a bunch of new members. I've had some big hits with some videos lately, and now I will let you go. See you next time.